Hello and welcome. My name is George Langford. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and it is a great pleasure to see all of you here this morning. Chancellor Syverud, Dr. Chen, Chairman Thompson, students, faculty, staff, trustees, friends of the university. It is a privilege and an honor for me to have the opportunity to open today's symposium in honor of Chancellor Syverud. Today marks the beginning of a new era for Syracuse University. It is an extraordinary and historic moment for our institution, and I want to express on behalf of our students, faculty, and staff, heartfelt congratulations to Chancellor Syverud on the start of his presidency and chancellorship at Syracuse University. We admire your energy and openness. We celebrate your intense focus on the academics and the future health of the university, and your engagement with and compassion for all of us who are part of the university family. On this historic day, the day we celebrate your inauguration as the 12th Chancellor and President of Syracuse University, we wish you every success as you embark on this journey as our Chancellor. We are the beneficiaries of your leadership, your vision, your guidance, and hold dear the wisdom that you bring to this position. So thank you for being our Chancellor and for the opportunity to share in this celebration with you today. Chancellor Syverud. Chancellor Syverud joins a list of great chancellors who have led this institution over the past 144 years. With unparalleled vision and dedication, former chancellors have grown the university from its origins as a single building on a hill to the modern campus that we have today, one that is integral to the city of Syracuse and the central New York community. The tradition of a private research university committed to research, academic excellence, and diversity, and outreach to the community is in great hands with our new Chancellor. So I hope that each of you who participated in the run this morning with the Chancellor have been invigorated, and for those of you who did not take part in that, I hope that the Chancellor will invite us for a run in the future. I want to again thank all of the guests, especially the friends and colleagues of Chancellor Syverud, who have come to be with us today. So on this auspicious inauguration in Syracuse, I'm reminded of the inauguration of President Barack Obama, who said on that day, "We will transform our schools and colleges and universities to meet the demands of a new era." He went on to say that it is not a path for the faint-hearted, for those who prefer leisure over work or seek pleasures of riches and fame. Rather, it is the risk-takers, the doers, the makers of things. So we are privileged to have Chancellor Syverud as one who will take risks, who will do, and who will make it happen, one who will transform our university. So on this day of celebration of past and present, the Chancellor asked us to examine how we will transform Syracuse University with this opening symposium entitled Great Universities in the Next 25 Years. Great universities will be educating students to enter a world of global competition, environmental change, a world of economic shifts and government upheavals, but also a world of brilliant new discoveries. Great universities will have faculty engaged in collaborative research to change the world. And the question becomes, how will great universities maintain the integrity of a rich history of providing competitive liberal arts education as they address research, innovation, new technologies, campus design, athletics, and leverage these strengths on a national scale? Will big data change the way we view the world? And will technology compromise or enrich the development of empathy? We have a wonderful group of panelists today who will discuss these topics. So I would now like to introduce my colleague and fellow dean, Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, Ann Clark, who will serve as today's moderator. Dean Clark has broad experience in higher education. She joined VPA in 1998 as a member of the School of Art and Design. She served as chair of the Department of Art and was appointed dean in 2008. Dean Clark serves as the representative to the Board of Trustees and was the representative on the Chancellor's Search Committee. Please welcome to the podium, Dean Ann Clark.
So welcome. I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleagues on stage. Catherine Newton, Dean Emerita and Professor in Earth Sciences in the College of Arts and Sciences. Welcome, Catherine. Jim Boeheim, head coach, men's basketball. Mike Haney, the Barnes Professor of Entrepreneurship, the Whitman School of Management. Michael Speaks, Dean of the School of Architecture. Shukai Shin, Professor in Engineering, the L.C. Smith College of Engineering and Computer Science. Dan Pacheco. These are his glasses. Peter A. Horvitz, Endowed Chair in Journalism, Innovation, SI Newhouse School of Public Communications. Thanks for the glasses, Dan. George Saunders, Professor of English, College of Arts and Sciences. Welcome. Marcel Haddix, Assistant Professor and Director of English Education Programs, School of Education. So our first question this morning, how will the research environment change and improve at the best universities? Catherine?
Thank you, Anne. Well, I'd like to just talk for a minute or two about the future of research at great universities and its consequences for our university. That is, how can Syracuse achieve its greatness as a major private university? And the first and most important thing I want to say is that the answer to this question is held in the hand of the question, which is that discovery, creative work, and invention are those metrics, those central and core properties by which we define great universities. So to begin with, it is the creation of that culture and the accomplishments that derive from that culture that, that lead to our recognition of the greatest universities. Somehow in America, this notion has gotten lost to the extent that recently in the New York Times, philosopher Gary Gutting felt a need to define what a university was, and in particular, what a great university is. And he says, for the New York Times, the purpose of a great university is, and I quote, to nourish a world of intellectual culture, that is, to nourish the world of ideas. So that's what research is about. And he went on to mention arts, social sciences, humanities, the law, natural sciences, information sciences, engineering, and computer sciences. But what I want to say this morning is that these best faculties, the places where the world of ideas is promoted to the greatest extent, these in turn create a world of ideas to which students and others are attracted. So research and teaching, therefore, are inseparable. Not that one is related to the other by evolutionary descent. Teaching doesn't come from research, but rather both research and teaching are nourished by this well of ideas. So in doing one, we are attracting students, in promoting research, we are attracting students into our world of ideas. Just want to say 3 very brief things about what the great universities need to attend to in this world of ideas now. First, and quite importantly, this world of ideas is actually fed and supported by structures and infrastructures. including that of time, right? So what are our systems that support these crucial endeavors that lead to the world of ideas, lead to the world of creative work and of invention? And given the economics of research and the attracting and mentoring of students, do our present systems support this world of ideas, or are there within it barriers? Are there barriers to this? The great universities are all involved in the allocation of resources. Where can we line up resources to feed the world of ideas and of discovery and of creative work? Eliminating barriers is one of the most important things any of us can do to foster the world of ideas. That is, our budget and other administrative systems need to feed and support this. Some of you probably are still thinking about the race this morning. And to put it this way, I would say, how much of your energy is going forward and how much of your energy is being expended in other ways? This is like the question of supporting research and discovery and ideas. Second, colleagues matter, and the collegial culture has absolute consequences for every great university. I will simply mention a mathematician who has just received the Abel Prize, and in talking about how the work that led to the prize was done, the first and only thing he said about this was he wanted to thank his colleagues down the hallway for creating a culture that allowed his discoveries to be made. I can always find a person to talk with, he said, talking to my colleagues here. Two things in particular are important about this collegial culture, and those are trust and shared commitment to emergence of ideas, things that that are born, that reach the public world, and these things have transcendent and even economic value. That is, you can develop monetary models for what trust means and what the collegial culture means. I think the measure of our success in this term, the collegial culture, is how often when Chancellor Syverud walks around the campus does he find people talking ideas in hallways. That's something for an annual report, and it's something that has financial consequences also for Syracuse. Third and finally, how do we treat those who have a wholly original concept, a bold new concept that transforms fields or invents fields? The great universities are really wrestling with this, how it is they can not only promote A or A- research, but really A+ concepts that drive the fields to come. Here, Syracuse has an advantage. We have been the place where fields have been invented, and we need to remember those biggest moments in our history. I want us to ask, how can we best transform or invent fields using the resources at our disposal and this collegial culture that I'm sure will be shown here today, including that of trust? And how thereby can we have our greatest impact on the larger field of the great universities of the future?
Thank you, Catherine. How will great universities integrate athletics and academics as the competitive environment for both universities and intercollegiate athletics as this evolves? Jim?
Well, thank you, and I'm privileged to be here today, and I'm sure I'm the least academic qualified up here. But I am a proud graduate of Syracuse University and the Maxwell School. I've been here since 1962, and I don't think anybody's been here continuously since 1962, but if someone has, I apologize for making that statement. I came here in 1962 to play basketball, but there was no hope and thought of playing in the NBA in 1962. Especially when you're 6'4", 155 pounds. That's not a thought in your mind. But we brought 8 freshmen in that year, and we kind of transformed Syracuse basketball. Syracuse football had won the national championship in 1959, so we were a good athletic institution. Not so good in basketball. We'd lost 27 straight games over 2 years prior to me, well, not me, Dave Bing coming here. I did take the ball out of bounds and make sure he had it. But those 8 guys that came here didn't think about the NBA, but we all graduated in 4 years. One of us did go on to play professional basketball and start a business and to become mayor of Detroit, which he doesn't like me to talk about too much. He's the only one that didn't graduate in 4 years. The other 7 of us, of course, did. Today's world, there's a myth that college basketball players or athletes are in college to play in the NBA and don't care about education. And that's really something that needs to be dispelled, because if we are going to be part of a college, a university, a great university, we have to have student athletes. And there's a myth that we don't have that. We have 2 seniors this year who were tremendous basketball players, helped us win more games than almost any class we've ever had here. 118 games in 4 years. They both will graduate with 3 credits in their spring semester. That's all they need to finish. We have a junior center who is going to graduate this summer after 3 years in 1 summer school and will be in grad school next year. We have kids that want to play in the NBA, every one of our players, but they're here to get an education, and they understand that. And I think it's important for people to understand that we're not about coming here to play basketball. We're about coming here to play basketball and getting an education. And I think when people realize that, I think then you're part of the university community. Our players love to be at this university. They don't just come here to play basketball. They're here to be a part of the student body. They don't live together. They live across campus. They interact with the student body. They get great support here from the student body. And I think that's the message that we need to make sure we're sending. I was not a great student, but I did graduate. And in fact, Dr. Price in the Maxwell School kind of wanted me to keep it quiet that I was in the Maxwell School. But, you know, I'll tell you one story about, I think, talking before with a member of the panel who had been at Duke in Kentucky. I said, well, basketball is fairly important there. 2 different schools, 2 different missions, but I remember meeting a girl from Duke in Paris. My daughter was over there in an exchange program, and she said, yeah, I like this program, but I'm leaving 2 weeks early. I said, what do you mean? Why would you leave the program 2 weeks early? We're playing North Carolina, and I'm going to be there. And you know, it tells you a little bit about what students think sometimes. I'm always proud when we have 35,000 students at a game, or 35,000 people at a game, but we have 4,000 or 5,000 students there. I think that's something that makes me feel good. I remember a story, I have to tell you one quick story. 30 years ago, we went to California to recruit a kid named Jay Billis, who's become somewhat well known. We did lose him to Duke. I told Jay, I tried to get him in here, I just couldn't. But I remember going out there and going to a couple high schools, and they said, you have to go to the office to get in, they say, you know, sign in. They said, where are you from? I said, Syracuse University. What's that? Where's that? Is that near here? No one knew at any of the high schools. 2 years later, I went back after the Big East was formed, and I went to get my baggage, and there was 2 baggage guys standing there, and they said, hey, aren't you Pearl Washington's coach? So I think there's some significance in that. I know I'm proud to graduate from Syracuse and to be able to coach here for 38 years, hopefully with a new chancellor. I hope I'll still be here, chancellor, if it's okay. But I've been proud of our program and what we've been able to bring. And I'm proud when people come up to me all the time and say, thanks, Coach, you get us through the winter here.
Great, beautiful.
And I think that's something that I'm proud of. And to be the coach at Syracuse is the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And I think we have a chancellor who's doing what he wants to do.
Beautiful.
And I'm proud to say that.
Thank you, Jim. Mike, in the past, great universities have changed dramatically in the wind up to wars and conflicts, as well as in the wind down. How will the best universities adjust to a time when the United States seems to be winding down some military involvement abroad?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to reframe my answer a little bit away from the notion of adjustment and maybe talk a little bit about enacting an opportunity, because I think that's really what we have. If you look back after World War II, the post-war GI Bill empowered 8 million Americans in the pursuit of higher education, included in that group 3 presidents, 3 Supreme Court justices, 14 Nobel Prize winners, 24 Pulitzer Prize winners, 94,000 scientists, 64,000 doctors, and 450,000 engineers, and countless others included in what we have now famously described as the greatest generation. And what's interesting is you can't tell the story of the greatest generation without telling the story of Syracuse University. More than any other institution in this country, we kicked open the doors to higher education for those returning veterans, accepted more than 10,000 in a span of less than 2 years. And it was as a consequence of their experience at Syracuse University combined with their military experience that accelerated their potential as individuals and as citizens. But we know that story. What we don't talk about enough, I think, is the extent to which that experience changed fundamentally Syracuse University. It made us better. They came here with global experiences, broad diversity, a commitment to service in our classrooms, on our athletic fields, in our student governments. They proved adept at building teams. They were resilient, resourceful, entrepreneurial. They were mature beyond their years, honest to a fault, fiercely loyal to the institution, and they brought to campus dynamic leadership that had been tested and proven truly in the most real-world conditions imaginable. They made this institution better. So if you talk about, again, for me, it's the opportunity. You talk about what will great institutions, the best among us, do in response to the winding down of this conflict. And I think it's going to be about engaging and empowering what could be America's next greatest generation, but importantly doing so in a way that is not about some misplaced sense of obligation. It's very easy and for some people very compelling to talk about engaging with those men and women who have shouldered the burden of the last 12 years at war as a function of repaying some debt, that we have some obligation that we owe them. And I will tell you, veterans are not victims, and I don't know a single one that wants anybody's pity. It devalues them. And back in 1945, Chancellor William Tully, the chancellor of Syracuse University, realized that more so than maybe all of his contemporaries. I think he was an academic entrepreneur. He had a vision for transforming a smaller regional university into a dynamic, nationally recognized institution. And he recognized a way to do that was to engage with a segment of society that he intuitively knew would emerge to lead the nation toward social and economic prosperity for the next generation. He knew that if we helped them change the world, if you will, that they would make us better as an institution. And that's, for me, the opportunity that I think we have today. If we look I remember where I was when we were winding up for this war. On 9/11, I was an active duty Air Force officer assigned as an instructor at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. And 10 minutes before the first class that I was scheduled to teach that day was about to start, plane impacted the World Trade Center. And I rushed to my classroom and I found 40 scared and confused Air Force Academy cadets, soon to be military officers. And we sat there together in that room and we watched then a second plane hit a tower. And finally, one of those cadets spoke up. A young lady said, "Captain Haney, this is going to change everything, isn't it?" And I said, "For all of you, forever." And it did in some of the most profound and in some cases traumatic ways that you can possibly imagine. And now they're all coming home. 3 million of them are coming home. So when I think about what the great institutions and the great leaders of those institutions will do to enact this opportunity, it will be based on the set of choices they make relative to how to engage with this community, specifically engage with this community in a way that empowers them to serve us again as students, as leaders, as employees, and later as alumni, again, empowering them in a way that they become the engine for their institution, for this institution, to elevate that institution to a national leadership role toward the pursuit of social, economic prosperity for the next century.
Thank you, Mike. Michael, how will the design of campuses change at great private universities in the next 25 years?
I have no idea.
Look into the future.
And I'll tell you in a second why that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I first will have to confess I didn't. Coach Boeheim has revealed that I had apologized to him earlier in the green room for being a Duke graduate and for having recently come from the University of Kentucky as a dean there. So apologies again and thank you. No, look, I think it's a good thing that I don't know, because if I knew, it would mean that we had a fixed plan and a fixed idea today that we could enact.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that's changed a lot in planning over the last 15 years is the whole idea of the master plan. It's been called into question. The idea of the master plan understood as a fixed idea that a group of 8 or 9 or 10 people come to develop, and that's it. And you develop that plan over a period of time. What we see now a lot more, and what's much more exciting, is a planning process driven by scenarios. Literally by thinking through, by working in groups and speculating on possibilities, and taking those possibilities really almost in a story-driven kind of way, and using those as a way to build a foundation, and then creating a plan that lives, a plan that changes and moves through time. You may know, at University of California system in 2010, they completed a plan for the future. And 1 year later, they had a new governor who was elected who changed the fiscal conditions of the entire state. All the plans they made, in fact, were not irrelevant, but they had to change. They had resources again that they didn't have before. So this idea of the master plan moving over and another much more flexible model of the plan emerging, I think is something that's extremely, extremely important. Two of the most important architectural and urban planners in the world today are both, one of them, Rem Koolhaas, a Dutch planner who made an office called the Office for Metropolitan Architecture famous, started out as a scriptwriter, actually. And in many ways, this exercise of asking a question, what would it look like? And us answering and saying, if then what, is the kind of process that scenario planning, I think, and scenario-driven knowledge production is about. So I would say a lot depends on whether we're talking about the design being a fixed thing or the design being a process. And more we see that process really leads to a more intelligent plan. My name is Speaks, and I will, of course, want to talk quite a lot, but I won't go over my 7 minutes. I want to add a couple of more things. There are some things we know we will see. Big data and smart campuses and smart cities are going to become more and more important. And what that means is the kind of data and the kind of sensors that record use and record information feed into a larger kind of active plan that learns and changes over time. We know that's going to happen. Sustainability is going to be more and more important, especially around energy use. Microsoft built a campus that was completed last year. Their 125 buildings over the course of the year have already saved 40% of their energy costs because they built a big data-driven smart campus plan. So there are a lot of new things on the horizon. I think we will learn and we will know more about those as a community. But we will not have a definitive answer. One thing we should also remember is that campuses in the future will begin to look more and more like cities. And the town and gown relationship will become more and more important. Here we have a freeway between our town and our gown, and that will be an issue that we'll have to deal with, going forward. But so in closing, I would say the best thing is that I don't know. The good thing is I think I can help us figure out how we might get to a place where we will know better and we will learn and we will move forward.
Beautiful. Thank you, Michael. Shukai, how can the best universities embrace technological change without losing key attributes that have made them very strong in the past?
Well, I have to first say that I'm enjoying listening to all of my other colleagues, and I have the misfortune of coming after them, but I'll try to be brief. Technology is usually a catalyst, it's a catalyst, not the ultimate cause for change. And so it's a means to an end. So I think the short answer is really we can get at by asking the question, so how do we make the best decisions in the midst of change and uncertainty? And for that, the short answer is speed of adaptation and trust, to follow up on what Catherine has said. And and why these two? I mean, I think great organizations can adapt quickly. And they can adapt quickly because they know how things work. They have deep insight into how the world works. And they know, I mean, have you ever seen an expert do something? You're flooded with data, you don't know what to pay attention to, but the expert says, okay, I don't need to look at that. This is what we need to look at, and this is what we need to think about. And that's the result of deep scholarship. And frankly, as an engineer, we are a technology-based society, and technology to the uninformed looks like magic. And if we live our lives based on magic, we will have terrible consequences. So great universities, great organizations will understand how things work. Okay, let's get to trust. So, and why do I single this out? If you read General Martin Dempsey's, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he has a white paper in 2012 called Mission Command. And in that, he cites Stephen Covey's book in 2006 called The Speed of Trust. And what General Dempsey has pointed out, and of course he manages and leads an organization that is constantly confronted with changing circumstances and technology, he points out that organizations operate at the speed of trust. And so this is about leadership at all levels. It is about individual contributors, it is about people in administrative positions, or frankly, people can exchange information up, down, all around. They can trust what they are told. They can believe that the institution is providing those supports that enable the right thing to be done quickly. And so this is less about technology and more about the kind of culture and organizations we build for ourselves. And so in order to save time, I'll just point out, as a technologist, and trust is one of the things I pay attention to, there is no app for trust. Mm-hmm. If you want to derive the benefits of trust, you have to be trustworthy.
Thank you. Dan, what lessons should great universities abstract from the most successful innovators and most innovative organizations in business?
Thanks, Anne. I think first I just want to say, I came here, I'm a professor of practice, and I'm here teaching kind of what I've done and what I've learned over the years. And I was an entrepreneur before I came here. And I think one of the reasons that I came here actually answers part of the question, which is because people thought, okay, you have this startup, why would you come into a university in academia? And the answer there is that I saw, first of all, they told me I could bring my entrepreneurial activity with me. And I saw there were so many opportunities across a university like this with so much raw talent, right? I mean, the best of the best. People from all different walks of life, whether it's, in technology, in, engineering, in architecture, and even in sports, right? And when you can bring all those people together, you can make things that change the world. Mm-hmm. And I think that an environment like this is really the incubator for the future of what our world will look like. So it's inherently entrepreneurial. And that's really what I think we really need to be doing in pretty much across the board at the university. So I just have a few points here. Lessons from business. Number one, interdisciplinary collaboration isn't just a nice to have in the business world. It's really a must have. It's required in order to make new things happen. You cannot, people like Steve Jobs, we think of him as inventing the iPhone and the Mac, but it wasn't just him. It was a whole lot of other people who he brought together in a sort of a symphony, right? Mm-hmm. A place like this to build the future. And that's a very important thing for us and our students to really understand and kind of learn together, is that we can build the future together in an interdisciplinary way. It's important for us all to embrace new technologies, understand the basics of how they work so that they don't just seem like magic. The quote that my colleague mentioned here was from Arthur C. Clarke, who said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And we're at an age now where it looks like magic is coming true, right? Magic is real. But if you understand how things work underneath, then you can really see new possibilities. So that's some things that I do and others across the university. We can really kind of bring all these different disciplines together, and technology can bring people together much in the way that music did in the past, right? Mm-hmm. But we can create things together. It's important for us all to be comfortable with disrupting ourselves so that we have a future. Because if we don't do it, there are many others who will. And so there are a lot of things in, a lot of companies and people out there kind of circling the wagons of academia thinking they can do it better. And we need to be really part of that change, otherwise we will be changed from without. Mm-hmm. There's the potential to change from within if we really, if we start taking the lessons from what a lot of these organizations from outside are trying to do to displace us. We could be, like the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, and actually partner with them, bring them in to the core of what we do, so that we have a future. Excuse me. Number 4, embracing the idea that innovation is an inherently messy process is very important. It's really the opposite of the waterfall approach. If you look at how a lot of businesses in the past built the businesses that exist today, it was people sitting around a table for a month or months or years trying to figure out what to do, creating the master plan, right? And then by the time they'd finally get something out into the real world, the world had changed and it's no longer relevant. In the startup world, the most innovative companies, they'll take a more agile approach. also known as lean startup approach. And they'll have a small number of individuals spend 90 days on a sprint to launch a minimum viable product. You know, I think that that's really important for us in education to kind of get this idea across. And even as we're looking at how we teach, you know, it's the way that we teach could be approached in a more agile way, which is my fifth point here, encouraging risk-taking even if it leads to failure. I've been teaching a coding class along with a colleague who's actually teaching it remotely with me, which is very, very, very interesting. And what we're learning is in order to teach people who've never coded before, you have to tell them that you know, learning is about the journey, not the destination. They're not penalized for trying and failing. They don't really fail as long as they document what they tried and where they got stuck. And then they can help each other out, and that's actually what they're learning. They're learning how to learn. And so with technology or you know, science or anything like that, it's very important to keep that in mind. And last but not least, we just need to get out of our students' way to allow them to learn. And I would say also, from a faculty perspective, you know, I feel like I've been very fortunate here as a Horvitz Chair, Journalism Innovation, with you know, everyone from my dean to my chair, to provost and hopefully new chancellor, been given a lot of freedom to just reach out, collaborate, and they're always moving barriers away. And I think the more that happens, the more we really will be able to continue to recreate the future of what is our university. So.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dan. I would like to say as an example of being nimble, some of the results that will be yielded just by this event and having this group come together is Dan and I have been talking about some of his projects. I see Lorraine Branham in the audience. We'll have a follow-up talk. It is really having this. Everything that we do is people connecting, sharing their thoughts and conversation, and being responsive to it. We are very fortunate to be at an institution where that can happen in this experiential and very connected and collegial way. So I'm excited. We'll let you know what we come up with.
It's going to be cool.
George, nothing is more fundamental to education and preparation for success than the ability to think critically and write clearly. What will distinguish the great universities of the future in terms of how these skills will be imparted to their students?
Well, I teach in the creative writing program across the way there, and I think my colleagues would probably agree with me that we're not organizational wonders over there. You know, we don't really go for that so much. But what we found, we've had a lot of success in the last few years. This year we got 600 applications for 6 places in our graduate program. So something's going right. And one of the things I've noticed is we don't really have plans or rules, but we have an ethos. And the ethos comes pretty spontaneously out of who we are and what we've learned. So for me, when we think about writing in the university, I think we'd want to have a fairly simple ethos. And for my money, it would go something like this. Writing is power. Writing is power. If a young writer engages with text, she does the first thing, which is she is able to export what she knows. That's good. She also does a second, deeper thing, which is she's able to find out what she actually thinks. The process of revising and so on puts you in touch with your best self, and it actually reveals to you what you think. That's an incredibly powerful thing. And so writing is power. Writing is going to let you realize your best self and inhabit the world more confidently. So in other words, it's not a flourish, it's not an obligation, it's not something they make us do, but it's this quickest path to your essentials and best self. Who doesn't want that? You know? Right. All right, so then the second thing is that writing, the power of writing comes through rigor. Self-expression is not that interesting, actually. You know, passing wind is self-expression. We don't care so much about that. But what we want to do is we want to communicate. Communication is the thing that we want. This is not natural or easy. It comes through rigor. It's actually a technical field. So we want to not shy away from from true rigor in our writing things. Okay. The second thing I think we want to do is we want to keep in our mind the idea that art is not optional. Art is necessary. Art is a skill that human beings have learned over thousands of years to cope with the mayhem that is life. The fact that we live, we love, we suffer, we die. The cavemen came up with stories because Blurg over here got eaten by a mountain lion. We love that guy. What happened? Where does he go? You know. So they huddled around the fire and they said, "Blurg is not gone. He's up." You know, whatever. So so I think part of what we have to remember, art is essential. It's not silly. It's important. And also, finally, the purpose of the university is not vocational. It's the expansion of the human soul. That's what it's for. We bring a young person in. We take her and we put her in contact with these ancient lineages, people who've been worrying about the same problems for thousands of years and have come up with some good stuff. And we ennoble her by saying, of course you're capable of this. If we keep our eye on that, then the university will do its job. And I can say, in my experience with Syracuse, I came here in '85, I think. At that point, I was a groundsman in an apartment complex. My recent Vita item was I'd worked in a slaughterhouse, so that was pretty good. But I was a pretty good writer, but I had only taken 2 English courses at the undergraduate level because I went to mining school. Somehow, out of that package, the university took me in, and they gave me a university fellowship. And at that time, I can remember very clearly how I thought, and I was starting to congeal a bit. I had the lid on my head was starting to seal, you know. When I got here, the university peeled that lid back. And they gave me the tools to peel the lid back and to become connected with a broader community. So I think part of what we want to remember is that that's the essential function of the university, to find value, trust it, bring it up, and then let it expand and make the world a better place. Simple ethos, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcel, how can great universities leverage the difference and diversity that our students bring with them to better prepare our graduates to be successful in the world?
So diversity can no longer be on the margins. It can't be an afterthought. It can't be an add-on. It can't be something that we kind of set to the side. As I listen to all the panelists, diversity and difference is central to everything that we've already talked about, right? And I hope you all see that too, that it shouldn't be a question that, you know, we think about, okay, afterward, let's talk about this. For me, when I think about diversity and difference, there are issues of representation, there are issues of access, issues of equity, issues of inclusion. Thinking about how this is central to our mission as a university, is central to what we do. It shouldn't be relegated to the Office of Multicultural Affairs. You know, it shouldn't be relegated to courses that have a diversity or a multicultural distinction, but it's something that we all take responsibility for. In 2014, there are still campuses where students of color, students from marginalized populations, are organizing, are speaking out, and using social media and spaces to let the world know that they feel unimportant in these spaces, that they feel like their voices, their histories, their experiences are not valued. And I think for the great universities, this can no longer be the onus of students to take that up, that these need to be issues that we're taking up as a community. That if we're inviting students in to be a part of our community, we need to be thinking about what are their histories, what are their questions, what are their issues, and how can we work with all students so that everyone feels included, like the student that you referenced, George. I think thinking about how we can let students know, you know, you're capable, you're a part of this community, and we want to help you to be great. In terms of inclusion, you know, the great universities, you're going to make sure that in terms of representation, when a student walks on the campus, they see themselves, they see him or herself represented on that campus. You know, in terms of issues of race, class, sexual identity, religion, students with disabilities, English language learners, immigrant youth, all students see themselves represented in the curriculum when they walk into classrooms, that faculty are taking up various issues teaching text, teaching stories, thinking about world problems and issues that represent multiplicity and multiple ideas. I feel at great institutions, students come here with or should come here with the expectation that the ideologies and the ideas that they come here with will at some point be challenged, that they come here to be questioned. Stealing from Dr. Cornel West, he often says, I hope that I'll say some things or you'll experience in my class things that will unhouse you, unsettle you, make you realize that everything you ever thought and believed rests on a pile of pudding. And that should be an expectation that our students come here and they feel a sense of transformation. And then lastly, just thinking about diversity and difference, that it isn't something that just stays within the university, but that we think beyond. We think about the local community. We think about the national community. We think about the global community. We think about the ways that students can engage with and be in solidarity with the people that are just on the other side of the highway, right? That we think about the ways that we can ask these questions and work together to solve solutions and problems for communities that aren't just to check off a diversity expectation, but that really get at the soul of who we are. And so when we move beyond SU, that's a sustained part of our culture and our identity. And I think that's how we help to build and help develop the leaders of the world.
Thank you, Marcel. So we are now open to the audience for questions and invite people to come forward.
I was wondering about the business model. Nobody spoke about the business model of the university and how that might change over the next years. I just did a quick calculations, and when I went to Columbia, it cost me $235 a semester. A candy bar costs 55 cents. Gasoline costs 25 cents. It's all about 20 times. Those costs have expanded about 20 times. Mm-hmm. The cost of education has expanded much more than that. And I was wondering if you would like to address that issue.
Thank you. So who would want to pick that one up?
Well, I would like to speak to that, just to say that, all the greatest universities are right now engaged in restructuring their budgetary models, aligning their budgets and processes toward the excellence they hope to achieve. This is not going to happen with the old business model. Absolutely. We have to be lean and mean, and we also have to, like the runners in the race this morning, align the energy toward the forward motion that not only Syracuse, but other great universities hope to achieve. So I'm just really grateful for this question.
Yeah. Other folks, I think that, and it also lines up with what you're saying, the necessity to become more nimble.
Yes.
Driven through ethos and values. So other people, I think in some ways that everyone has addressed
I would touch on one thing of which I know nothing about, but I know, because that's what a panel is for, actually. Right. But no, I think there's a student loan crisis. Yeah. I mean, and it's not class blind, you know. People who are taking these student loans are now being shown, I just heard on NPR, to be lagging behind their peers later in life because they're so in debt. I don't know anything about how that would be fixed, but it would be silly to act like that wasn't a moral, ethical dilemma for us. Yeah. If we are disadvantaging our students from the get-go, then that's not a good thing.
Absolutely. Dan?
There's a lot that can be done with online, obviously. So at the Newhouse School, in about a year, I believe, we're going to be launching an online master's program. Specifically so that students who want to continue to stay in a job, so they don't have to leave their day job to get a graduate degree, can do so. And I think there are a lot of experiments like that out there. Obviously, things like MOOCs experiments to to kind of expand education, and So, technology isn't the entire answer, but I think that it does play a role.
Could I add some? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, well,
please, go ahead.
It's funny, I swore, as soon as he started talking, I swore I wasn't going to touch this question, but now, I think a lot of what we're talking about up here is about, lean and infrastructure and cost reduction. I think it's also important to, I'm a business school professor, what's the value proposition? And we also have to be focused on developing a lot of the ideas that we talked about up here in the context of delivering value to our students, regardless of that, that makes sense relative to that tuition that we're asking for. I think both of those things have to be the focus of effort to get that balance right.
Absolutely.
I want to just add one thing. Take George's sort of suggestion that we can speak about things about which we know very little, so I'll run with that and say that, but actually I do know something about this. I think we have to really be able to show how our curriculum in particular adds value in a very different way than we have in the past. For example, if you read in the New York Times or you read in the Washington Post, every week you will read the top 10 courses of study that you should not encourage your student to engage in. Architecture and fine arts, sorry, and we are always right at the top of that list. And that is because people still imagine that we are training architects to go and build and do things in a traditional way. I would make the argument that we're training our students to be professional architects, but also the educational model of architecture is a model I think that business schools are adopting now, and that many others, and it's based on two things, and I touched on this with this master plan idea. One is iterative learning. There is a proposition, a what if, or let's say a set of constraints, you make a proposal, you make a design, you make another design, and you essentially refine that through an iterative process. That is the engine of innovation. That is something I think we all need to, and it's about failure, it's about prototype thinking. That's what our students do just automatically. The other thing that we do automatically, and this is another, I think, part of, it's another way that we can make an argument that we offer a very different value proposition and we add value, is that all of our work is team-based. So we produce our work in groups, we present our work in groups. We actually are from the very beginning in a kind of a client-producer relationship. So I would say iterative thinking and group work is something that all curricula will have to begin to develop, and we do it already, so the entire university should become architecture, I think.
Shukai.
Well, I would be remiss in pointing out, if I failed to point out, that the questioner is Dr. Fred Schlereth, who used to be one of my bosses at General Electric. But more importantly, Fred was one of the innovators who created the company Infocon, which is a local company that made equipment for semiconductor manufacturing and measurements that was bought out and wildly successful by Leibold Heraeus. And I think, Fred, in answer to your question, I would turn it back to you and ask you what your business model was, but I suspect it had something to do with providing things that worked, and you had a track record that was reproducible so that people could essentially be assured that they would get the best from you, and that you've had something new and innovative. And I think that holds true for us.
Thank you. Another question from the audience.
Do you see any contradictions between the philosophy of developing an ethos and the necessity of being nimble and embracing diversity? Or should our ethos just be adaptive? Given that on the assumption that developing an ethos takes time and thought and commitment, do you see any contradictions there?
George, do you want to start with
Well, I mean, in our program, the ethos was, it was there already, you know, and basically just working together, we started to see what we actually believed about writing and so on. So in a sense, it's not about constructing some conceptual outside thing and then imposing it, but it's saying, you know, what do we usually feel? What do we usually believe? What are our deepest values? In our program, it just turns out, because of the background of many of the people, this idea of trying to find talent in unusual places and nurture it is something that we believe in. So I think the thought would be, it's hard to make 1,000 decisions, but it's easy to have one ethos, and the ethos then informs the decisions. You know, you go back to the baseline, what do we believe? So to me, there's not really a contradiction, but I would also say we're very small. You know, so we run on a KS model pretty well, you know. But so in a larger sense, I don't really know. But the university should just be 6 people. That's my plan.
I think that you want to have some friction and moments of contradiction, because that's how change happens. You know, when you think of issues of diversity and difference, it's easy to develop a policy or a statement and that become, you know, institutionalized and it's finite and that's it, and never revisit it. But if you're really thinking about wanting to embrace some kind of change and move forward, then you want to always be encouraging difference of ideas, difference of perspectives, bringing different people to the table who are going to challenge, you know, a long-standing ethos, even, so that it continues to grow and develop and change. And so that's what I would be advocating for, that we actually need those moments. And I think students are the catalyst for that. That, you know, this is 21st century generation. They're bringing new ideas. They think about diversity and difference in ways that I certainly didn't think about. And so we have to make sure that they're also at the table and bringing their perspectives to the front.
And it points back to, Michael, what you were saying about a master plan. We go from the idea of a master plan to systems and immediately people. And what are all of those things that are feeding and driving those pieces? I mean, it is, you know, in any given day for me as dean, certainly finances is, you know, is this issue. But if you know, that's what's driving it, we lose the best of what we had. I do think that it's striking that in what we've heard so far, that the conversation and the offerings really is in this space of values and systems and experience, student experience, faculty experience, the connections, and then realizing how we can operationalize those values in increasingly more effective ways. Yeah. Another question?
Hello, how you doing? I had a quick question about the value of research and about speaking to a community about the value of research. We on this campus have been doing a great deal of work in a lot of different areas, but we live in this era where there is literally creeping anti-intellectualism going on across the country. We have a lot of people who are openly questioning openly questioning research, openly questioning the value of these kinds of things. And if we as a university are going to survive, part of that value proposition has to be to talk about the value of this. I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on how we communicate that value to our publics out here in a way that maybe will, of course, I think need to be different because of some of the pressures on the university from outside.
Thank you, Hub. Dan?
So, Hub, that was a great question. I'm not a traditional researcher or a traditional academic, but you know, looking at you know, in the entrepreneur world again, research and development is also very important. It's something that we don't do enough of in this country, and actually other countries are kind of surpassing us, right? But I think if we can bring this concept of research and development and also making a collaborative process with the community, so that you know, there are a lot of things that you know, none of us know the answers to, right? And that's why we're here. We're trying to figure out the answers to some big thorny questions. You know, one of them that I was talking to, you know, Anne and also some friends in architecture about is, you know, how do we you know, how do we bring everybody into the visioning process for what is the future of their cities, right? You know, as a relative newcomer to Syracuse, I see this whole city is being rebuilt from the ground up. And it's a great opportunity to bring new ideas from, you know, architecture, but also think about, you know, the spaces where people, you know, live and work and commute. And that ultimately then people's stories of problems they're trying to solve in their daily lives. I see that as an opportunity to do something with the community where they can all together figure out what they want their community to look like in the future. So wouldn't be a traditional research project, right? That just one researcher is working on.
Right.
We could involve everybody in that and then learn together, and that's the way that I look at it from the relative outsider's
I do think that we
perspective.
can institutionally continue to work on the communication of what is research. It's a particularly interesting question for Syracuse University. We have professional schools. So, George, you said not vocational. We're an institution which has a lot of professional schools. How do we frame that, and how are we asking the deeper questions? What does this research yield? So, if you say that there's an anti-intellectualism out there, it's like, oh, well, what are you doing? What is that yield?
One thought about that, and this is coming from a creative writing field. There is, as the arts dwindle and they become more cult-like, there's a tendency for us to say, here's why it's good for you. That's deadly, because as soon as you say, here's why it's good for you, some bureaucrat or dictator can say, I don't think that's good for you. Let's kill that guy, or at least let's not publish him. So I think we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of becoming mere pragmatists, or the research is valuable because it pays off. Research is valuable because it gets you more money. There is an abstract value to what we do, and I don't think we should betray that. So in the arts, there's a great art critic named Dave Hickey who says, to the extent that you try to make art useful, you're going to set it up for a fall. It's not actually useful in any practical sense, but it's beautiful. And we have to, I think part of what we have to do is not work too hard to placate, while at the same time doing excellent things. The excellence is sort of hard to argue with, but I think the placating is a little bit...
Yeah. Catherine, would you
Well, I
like to?
agree with what George is saying, and I would go a little further, because though there is this an intellectual climate, the paradox is that the world is hungry for the discoveries and creations and inventions that happen right here at Syracuse and at her sister universities. So look at the success of writers, and we're right now in this interval where there is an amazing transition, long hoped for, of young people into the STEM disciplines. There's almost an insatiability about it. And we've hoped for this. So Syracuse and her sister universities, speaking the language of discovery. The public is hungry for discovery. So the public is hungry for the things we offer, but they can't be packaged in the "it's good for you" terminology. So I just agree completely here. Discovery for its own sake is most of interest to people.
And the anti-intellectual monster gets fed when we say, we're not intellectuals. We are, actually. It's all right. It doesn't,
I would disagree just briefly with the proposition that we're living in a more anti-intellectual culture. I think you may hear more of that, but I disagree. I think we don't do a very good job at the university of making the kind of research we do actionable, and I think we don't do a good enough job of knowledge transfer. So I think there are many ways we can do a better job of that. There are very few jobs out there. There are very few things that people do in the world today that don't have knowledge at their basis. And we are the preeminent producers of knowledge, and we are the producers in the storehouse of knowledge. And I think we have to tell better stories about the way in which the knowledge we generate here has value and translates into the world. So I disagree with the proposition that we live in a more intellectual world. I think we live in a world where we are asked more and more to be very clear about the value that we're adding. And I think that we will have to do a better job with.
And all knowledge does not originate here, right?
That's true.
I mean, it could be this conversation. I think that crowdsourcing and what the internet's taught us is we can do more. I think to kind of open things up and be more, be more like Google.
Thank you.
So as we have this dialogue about creating a great university for the next 25 years, and I think a crucial part of the strategy will be about our students. And as educators, so I want to ask about your opinion on what a student body we want to attract here to campus in our pursuit of creating a great university. And in Coach Benham's case, maybe share your experience, share your success, how you were able to recruit so many talents to our program here in Syracuse.
Let's have Jim talk about recruiting.
Well, I kind of laugh a little bit when we go out to see players. Obviously recruiting is everything for us, because if we don't recruit, I'll be coaching at high school or someplace else, or be back in my family business in Lyons as a funeral director. The problem is everybody knows a great player when you're watching players play, or if you're looking at great students. Everybody knows who are the great ones right now. The key is who is going to be a great student or a great player down the road. And that is always difficult. I remember going to watch a kid play, and there was the top 200 players, and he wasn't playing. He wasn't in the top 200, but he was there at the camp, and I watched him warming up and for 2 or 3 minutes, and there was just something there that I saw, and we recruited that young man. He became an All-American here and blocked the shot that won the national championship for us in 2003. So he has a special place here in my heart. And he actually did something almost out of position that he hadn't really been coached to do, but part of coaching and teaching is to enable your players or students to be able to do something that you haven't taught them, but they've learned. And the key for me, and it always is, to find those players. For some reason, great players want to go to Duke all the time. I remember a professor of mine here many years ago, a history professor, said to me, "Jim, why can't you out-recruit North Carolina?" And I said, "Well, have you ever been down there in January?" But it's finding those players and students, I think, is a huge key. And I think athletics can help. I think it really can. I remember when Doug Flutie threw the pass that was caught in the end zone by a kid named Gerard Phelan, both who have capitalized on that a million times over, that one play. But the next year, Boston College's application went from 2,500 to 12,000.
Wow.
And I'm sure in that extra 9,500, there were some pretty good students in there because of Doug Flutie. So I think that can help. I think that's some way we can help in athletics. But certainly it's finding those students and getting them to come to Syracuse. And that's what makes me or breaks me in terms of what we're going to be in basketball, because you have to have great players to have a great team.
So anyone else want to comment on the recruiting? The part of the question, as I heard it, was also speaking to the student experience. The student experience on campus, referencing online. What is the role of the student experience? And that does go to athletics. It goes to all of these things. The live experience here, community,
I can comment on that.
Yeah.
When I look back, when I was in college, what I remember most is kind of things that I was able to create with other students, right? with the help of faculty and facilities. But this idea of making things is so powerful. And we've been doing some of that here in media, and it's been really amazing bringing developers together with designers and storytellers. We did a package about Pan Am 103, looking back 25 years. And it was just a very powerful experience, a moving experience for the students. And I know that they will look back 25 years later and say, that was a real formative experience for me. And that's something that's actually difficult to recreate online in the same way, right? So I think we have to acknowledge that part of the value of having people coming here together and having an on-campus experience is being able to sit down next to somebody and then work something out together.
Catherine, would you like to?
Some of the happiest Syracuse students and alumni are people who have had the moxie and the opportunity we provide here to combine curricula that are not traditional combinations. Look, we offer that here, and we often deliver it. People who are doing this, by the way, they're going to be the weary people you see out there in April. Are you kidding? The people with 2 or 3 degree programs. But in answer to your question, I think really going after the people who have shown any inclination to do this and that, where this and that may be quite far apart, those are Syracuse kind of people. And our research shows that those people are also very fast track. So George mentioned, I may not have your words exactly, finding talent in unusual places and nurturing that. Well, some of those unusual places are people who are interested in sculpture and biochemistry, right? And I think that would be a wonderful strategy.
Can I say that I love that you just used the word moxie? I thought that was a South Side of Chicago word. And also I'll undercut all the high-minded things I said earlier and say that branding is not a bad deal. In our program, we have some really wonderful graduates. Cheryl Strayed, for example, who wrote Wild as a graduate, and we have used that. Whenever I go to a college, I always make a point of listing the alumni who've just published. And we brought about Arthur Flowers, my colleague, brought about 15 recently published alumni back to campus. And it created this beautiful kind of ripple effect. So I think one of the things we do very baldly is to try to get Syracuse and writing tied up in people's minds wherever we can, so that when a young person thinks, oh, writing, I don't know, Cheryl Strayed comes to mind, or Sal Placencia, and so on.
Thank you.
I think to answer Ying's question, the type of students that I've always enjoyed and would spend large amounts of time and effort on, frankly, those students who are very curious and for whom their goal, or their sense of their goals, is not about becoming a master of the universe and enriching themselves in the material sense, but providing some value and service to others. And if you look at our international students, right, many of them fit this profile because, well, I'll just speak as an engineer. Engineering is one of the paths that working class families come to professionalize themselves, and students from outside this country recognize that when they go back to their countries, that they are able to improve the quality of life for their families and for everybody around them. And so that kind of ethos and the willingness to be disciplined and hold oneself accountable, that we find a lot in our international students. And so, I know you're involved in that recruitment process, and I can only encourage you to do what you're doing and do more of it.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I've gotten the signal. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. Welcome you to all of the future events throughout the day.
I would like to thank my esteemed colleagues on stage. It's a privilege to be here with you.
So thank you very much.